Welcome to YouTube MASTERCLASS. We're working for COURSERA, an internet program with remote classes taught for credit for the college that you choose through COURSERA that ours works for. Harvard. Yeah, you heard it, Harvard University, the best school in the world. Yeah, the very best school in the world. Now, there's film class. And they're putting together, through a intense bureaucracy involvement, maybe more film programs here, and I'm so excited that at any chance of a film school break, and rumors have been sifting around, but I'm so far from the main event because I'm in Colorado. But that doesn't disclude me because I also help run the New York Drama Critics Circle as their social media analyst. And I don't really think that I'm leaving that position anytime soon, since I just sold a play to Playbill in order to keep my job at New York Drama Critics Circle, where I was teaching like Aristotle's Poetics over to social media on LinkedIn. And so here I am in Colorado, and why do these jobs come up? Well, because remote jobs can be taught from anywhere and guided into anywhere. And then with YouTube, anyone can come to the class and then take the class for COURSERA, and COURSERA requires you to watch from one end, zero, to the end of the episode that you're watching. It's not an episode, it's a lecture by a professor. And I've been like, well, I'm a new professor who should have been teaching sooner by now, waited until kind of the last minute of getting my PhD before I then submitted my role to teaching. Now that I would have planned it better, I'd have submitted my role to teaching and then collected my PhD so I could have easily gone over there. Now you're on the other side, the icebergs are starting to part, and you are on both sides, and now you fall into the water, because it's hard to go about it either way, but that when you're in graduate school, there's certain requirements about teaching even as an undergraduate, especially when they're prepping you for the bigger awards. So we can't thank YouTube enough for electing us as a master class, because it's like Library of Congress too. It's like, well, they can appoint us as teachers to schools we got degrees from. USC wasn't even concerned about giving me a master's because of some portfolio work turned in that made them some business, and it was a good deal, so they took it. But like, they were more interested in keeping me in the loop, like having me run the D.W. Griffith Chair program. And I could go into stories about the D.W. Griffith Chair, but one thing I will say is I had to make sure that all the African American staff was okay with even having a D.W. Griffith Chair. And at first they weren't. And then I proposed to make sure that they knew that if I took the chair, I would specifically remind audiences of today that Griffith, whether he was trying to be racist or not back then, doesn't matter, because by today's standards, it looks like everything about that movie is racist. So was it the passage of time that made it racist? Because the passage of time can change the way images look, not just because of other stereotypes. Well, there were a lot of African Americans that thought it was racist when it came out. So, and that Japan was coming forward with that, and that Griffith didn't just ban the whole thing then, was the biggest problem. See, at least Kubrick at that point would have banned the whole movie, but that Griffith thought somewhere in the movie there was an ounce of decency, which he was totally wrong about, which is why we love the film, because nowhere in that film is there an ounce of decency, and that's the secret rule of cinema. But that it's so sanguine, you can't really watch Birth of a Nation from like a Reefer Madness subversion, which is ironic, because Griffith couldn't see Reefer Madness as subversive either, that it was intentionally stupid. But Griffith's film, not just because of the symmetrical hierarchies focused in the frame, Griffith painted painterly, which means we're like controlling the pictures too, or seemingly so, at the way the editing's going. And the editing, match on action, match on movement, match on eyeline match, subject-object positioning, male subject, gaze upon female in soft focus, shot reverse shot before the 180 line. And we've talked about all these meanings of setting up and building and creating the film and how you have to keep track of that to see how to set up the shot so you can analyze the shot later and see how it moves to the next shot. So we can't really do that too good without showing a clip, and that my class, unfortunately, you're all going to boo this, but we don't do clips. We do clips on other shows that are funny, but it's not that we don't have copyrights to do clips, and we are going to get to this soon. This is the movie we're talking about. It's called The Decalogue, and it's by Krzysztof Kieślowski, and that it won a special jury prize at Cannes. It's really beautiful, and it's called The Decalogue, and it's 10 films. And it's a foreign film. It's like Danish, I want to say. Kieślowski, Swedish? Well, I'm going to get a point off for that because it looks like Polska. The Decalogue. I'm sorry I'm ruining this for everyone because now I'm looking for like Kieślowski, and if it turns out to be Russian, I'm sorry, please don't ban me. Some of this is Slavic. I know we're having problems with the Russians, but that doesn't mean you ban the show just because we teach a little bit of Russian stuff. So I wasn't like hesitating because he made 3 colors. This is what I want to tell you. Blue, white, and red. And those were all, Juliette Binoche and Blue. And those were all the foreign films that came out in the 90s that everybody went to theaters to see. Even in my hometown, Grand Junction, everybody's going to see Red, White, and Blue. And that they're the French film-colored flags. And that it's a 3-part series, but each movie's connected, is how eventually the Decalogue is before that came out. And that Kieślowski's done some interesting things with his career. Just all comes to a head in the Decalogue. And now, before I get into the Decalogue, I just want to mention that we lucked out with YouTube MASTERCLASS because they have committed to letting us serve them for as long as we can go. So we may take the YouTube MASTERCLASS unless there's something else above that to achieve, and then we go there. Because we became YouTube creators with a show called Two Badass Businesses. And that's hard to spell, so if you don't find it right away on Google, it's still a Google top threader, Two Badass Businesses. The show that created the movies of Orgy of the Damned. It's like a wave of a show. It's like all the glitz and the glam, and then all the way to the horror film. The musical comedy here, and then the horror show mixed around. And it's like a really good show, and it's like most of it shot from inside a car. Like, that's my style. And I'm not going to talk too much about the specific things about it because a lot of that show is actually using a lot more tricks of the film trade than would seem, in that the females, my cousins, Ashley and Amanda, they would pull tricks that they do were film tricks. And they'd direct certain scenes, and I'd send them away to direct a certain scene. And like even now I'm seeing stuff that I don't remember being in there that I'd given them information to splice it in. So I wouldn't be surprised if some of it's altered, but at that it would be in my original intent is true, because I'd already hypnotized them to go make those scenes the way I wanted, but made them forget that that was me that hypnotized them. So they're like, he won't know that we're changing his movie. But I did that way ahead of time. I told them they had to go change 3 parts, and so they went and changed 3 parts. And I don't know what that exactly means, but the point is there are clever filmmakers crawling around, clever filmmakers, and it was totally a freak of nature that the Cannes Film Festival gave my movie Orgy of the Damned a prize, a Grand Prix. And by Grand Prix, I don't mean the Toronto Grand Prix. I mean the Grand Prix at Cannes that you can take for stepping back from the Palme d'Or in an undeclared time. That I could have taken the Palme d'Or isn't to my credit, because I didn't feel I had any competition. Even when I brought in the Iranian films from Kaim Sohag Rana, who wouldn't have beaten Orgy of the Damned only because his films would have either had to have taken the whole point of the festival, which was to show Orgy of the Damned, or they would have showed his, and no one was interested because it was the Trauma group, although Trauma has Iranian filmmakers working for it. Now, from what I heard at the festival, there wasn't even a chance that KM Sohag Rana was going to let Orgy of the Damned lose to one of his films. Meanwhile, I'm thinking, how can we just all tie for first when we all tied for first? Because I got to announce it by the time they were there. Because he did not want the Iranian film to win, even though if it was a better film, and he didn't think it was. He thought Orgy of the Damned was much better. And I kind of appreciate him for that, but I'm like, well, your film was technically made more calculated, you know? And now we're back at like, well, I thought you were talking about race and Birth of a Nation and banning films, and I'm like, well, at first it seems that way, but then in the really poetic, flowery, quiet moments of them all, you can think of a way to make something even more interesting as a multicultural breakdown of stereotypes could do. Now, the Decalogue, and so, well, I was real surprised we took Khan, but here's the loophole. There was nobody running against us, and we didn't take the Palme d'Or and shared it with KM Sohag and Ragna, and their country, Iran, got their Cannes prize, and everyone in France went back to Marseille, drank martinis, and watched Orgy of the Damned again so they could hopefully hallucinate through it. I've never hallucinated through it, but I hear there's ghosts everywhere and shit. But yeah, there's 10 versions of that movie. I could go on and on. We won another film festival, and my buddy went to that one and accepted the award, but what I'm getting at, and that was Sundance, Robert Redford, who didn't like my other Trauma movie that sucked, but he reluctantly watched the first 15 seconds of the movie and was hooked for about 30 minutes of it. He remembered some other films I made that were submitted to Sundance by my friends in Colorado, that they were always up for almost nominations or whatever, were up for nominations or whatever, got me the Best Director for Orgy of the Damned. Now that everyone's saying that's a good film, every time I watch it, it's a good film. There is one thing that distracted my godfather, Dr. Rosh Shaneka. He said every once in a while the characters, when they're not being talked to or not saying anything, look up at the camera, because he's like, when they're saying something, that's like a match on eyes to shift the dialogue, but when they're looking at the other character when they're talking to, and so the eyes kind of look toward the camera, and I can look toward you guys at the camera and not be crazy, but did you know in a narrative filmmaking situation, if there's actors talking to each other, that's why they cut back and forth. Nobody looks at the camera, because if you look at the camera, you're looking at the audience, and you're breaking the fourth wall. It's like the guy can see the audience. I see you down there. I can see you down in front, you know. It's like, I can't actually see you taking this class, but just the very insinuation that I say I can see you is maddening, because now I'm thinking, what if there are devices later where you can see all the people taking it? Now, most of the people that take this take it after I record it, because right now I'm not preaching live. That someday MASTERCLASS may find itself on a live venue in a couple of episodes. Don't be surprised if that happens, because there may be parameters that the internet goes back and forth on, but for now, we're very secure in what we're doing. We've been approved by MASTERCLASS. COURSERA was happy to have us back, even if we did condemn them when our credits first didn't turn. USC's like, all right, Griffith Chair news of the day. You know, and I can even put that on the Onion, on the AV Club that I got to join. But then the weirdest mix-up of all about my own career, and then we'll get on to the Decalogue, is I just wrote this novel called Genji the Summoner. And it's a Japanese history novel, only it's really accurate in Japanese metaphor and history and religion and poetics and politics and gambling, which wasn't really too prevalent, but enough so that in Tokyo and the theater district, were overrun by prostitution and thieves, but they weren't like, they were the classy type, you know. The Genji the Summoner takes you to the tops of mountains, down to the bottom of the sea. It's like, I think Miyazaki had a lot of influence over it, and I'm already hearing that their studio is liking this Genji Summoner type American craze, and they liked that there was no white savior in it. Like, even me as the narrator, the only white guy in the story, except the two missionaries kick each other's ass and get kicked out. I don't need a white guy in the story, and I'm like, actually, this is not what I agree with. I didn't sign up for this, and I'm just trying to chart the history as it is, as it's atrocious to me that they would live this way. You know, I'm like all condescending, intentionally to be like the British guy, masterpiece theater guy. In ancient primitive Japan, it's like we always put that word primitive in. We're like, film syntax doesn't make sense. Well, maybe it's primitive. But we use that word also for things that turned into the seed that grew the tree, like it was a primitive shot, but it would have never led to the fixed shot if it wouldn't have been identified as primitive. That primitive doesn't always have to be remade, because in its original ancient form, does it still fulfill its beauty, like a sculpture at the Vatican? In its ancient form, does it still fulfill its beauty? And it was a good win for me. I'm not going to talk too much about my own movies. I just had to bring you up to date about some credentials, that there may have been doubt that this was really a Harvard class, which I've never had doubt from my friends and my professors. But there is a professor named Edwin McCann who used to teach me at philosophy school, undergrad, and I was a professor assistant for him in my freshman year. And it's at the USC School of Who's Philosophy Library, the School of Philosophy, USC, and it's Rosh Shemeka and Edwin McCann. And Edwin McCann actually became the hero of my references because I'd helped him out as a nurse assistant for like 3 weeks before I had to go to grad school, and he almost died, and I brought him back to life. And I'm not bragging about it because I won't go into grisly detail, but he was very happy, and that wasn't like an instant ticket to Harvard, and I didn't think it would be. I wasn't playing it that way. I was like, I got to hilt out a Harvard professor. This is cool. You know, he's back. We watched Plan 9 from Outer Space. We're laughing. We're back in reality, right? And that was the final film that broke him persona-wise out of his coma, was Plan 9 for Outer Space. So give it up for Ed Wood for having like some Dianetic code. He probably had the Dianetic code, right? Because that was the same year. So we're going to take the Decalogue and change the subject, because I could get lost in a stream of metaphors about why I made Diary of a Blacksmith, or why Insane Clown Posse's in, why I think they gave their credit to Orgy of the Damned, and how we got so much good music. I will say my library came because I didn't monetize my YouTube page. I'm not making money off of it. YouTube's making a killing, and that the product is valuable makes the money off of it, because every view still makes my product valuable, but they own it at YouTube, so it actually gives them back their own money, except for whoever watches it is basically contributing $10 worth of their phone time to watch it for, like, which it's a gig anyway, and that's been seen like 100,000 times. $10 a piece, that's $1 million, but the movie's taking more than that. And so now, being a poor man as I am, I'm thinking, let's take that and influence what we can of the next art projects. And Genji the Summoner came from that, and Genji the Summoner did the same thing. As soon as Penguin Random House, we'd just gotten like this load of like 40 nonfiction books that are about cinema and philosophy, and they're all like dissertations, and they're published with Time Magazine, they're published with Atlantic, you know, quantum mechanics of physics. And all these books were coming out at once, and then somehow I unburied 12 books I'd written before those that were all novels, and I'm still struggling to make an index for that one. And I think that's the only way to put closure on that project, is to make some kind of a fake index. Not that I wouldn't use words that were in it, but a fake index is like an unnecessary glossary of everything that might be related to the books. And that way I can clarify like certain outlines in a weighted index, you know. And that's the reason I bring that up, is because my fans and followers were all sure they'd seen everything and heard everything I'd done, and there were only like 2 or 3 of them, including me, that barely remembered that I'd written those 12 books. So it seemed like now even I'm doubting my own story. Ripley's Believe It or Not. But I saw the books, and they're all real books, and they look pretty good, and they're like my Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy books, but not as funny. Totally pumped with random references to everything, dude. I mean, postmodern books that I came off of that, and all those 40 books, and got Penguin Random House to cover all the online distribution through LinkedIn and everywhere else that we use their label on our books. So Genji the Summoner is coming out, so now I'm making a novel for the first time in 3 years, and it looks like for the first time in 10 years, because Paradise Fast was my first novel, and it's a weird book, and that book won the Webiverse, won the Pulitzer online, and then, yeah, so Paradise Faust is pretty good. It's a little superstitious, but that could have been the name of the book, Superstitious. I was going to call it Superstitious, but they're so superstitious that they keep imagining things until they become real. See, when you imagine something so long it becomes real, you know you're in a spiritual dimension. But we're not going to go over that because it's kind of repetitious that they keep imagining the same doom, sometime in bigger and bigger forms that they can't do nothing about and shouldn't even be praying or whatever. But now you flash forward past that book and the 12 novels in between of like everything from like that story about the telemark, which I'll tell you on Masterclass someday, and that story about Siddhartha Utopia, the communist Buddhists or whatever. And I'm doing a New Testament Apocalypse. Now hear me out. I know some of my work is flawed for even having religious studies in, not just a religious studies section, which I'm supposed to take out of an art meeting anyway. According to the Hegelians, we have left behind certain things from our art history. So then in art history, for us to discuss these things, we're very pleased that these films that we're talking about on Masterclass and that Masterclass is having us talk about, and so confident are all of us at YouTube Masterclass that we can do this for 12 years. And after each 2 years, each semester, after 4 semesters, that'll be 2 years. That'll be 16 units per class. That's 32 plus 32, that's 64 units. Plus 24 is 86 units that I can get if I do summer school, which I'm doing summer school too. So summer school too, and not to shorten the 12-year term. The 12-year term is coming with summer school. Now, I didn't get an advance for that, but get this. Someone told Penguin Random House I was doing Genji the Summoner, saw like 2 pages of it, and I got an advance on the publishing. That was my biggest payout ever. I mean, I didn't get the pay to me, but not the biggest payout ever, because that was when I redeemed my Harvard PhD and redeemed my CALARTS PhD, but all the money I got from that I had to put back in to the things I was putting on as published by, as studio produced by, Penguin Random House, and pay all the fees and the Writers Guild fees, and all the payout for that was coming from the places that were giving me the payout to pay them the payout. If that's not the way Hollywood works, then I don't know how else it works. They give you a check. You go to the prop store and buy everything. You bring it back to them, make the movie. The movie makes $100. You hand it back to the guy. That's how it works. He give you the money, you hand it right back. That's what they should do in Hollywood. It's just like, let's just switch wallets and switch back. Switch wallet, switch back. That's the producer. Now, the producer knows ahead of time that everything filmed in a shot is the money of the film. That's why you have to own everything in the shot. But, like, for instance, I get carte blanche when it comes to filming in Grand Junction, because when I was doing music work at Clifton Village South with my character Poor White Trash, who's from the Dead Teddy Riders, he played out there, but he had to call the department of the local town of Grand Junction, the Department of Grand Junction Parks and Rec, and like monument services or whatever. We got it all over town and all over near town that we can film anywhere we want. And they even go so far, the Chamber of Commerce says, film in any place you want. And this is right when the pandemic's approaching and we're making Orgy of the Damned and Two Badass Businesses. Now they're the big hit shows they were meant to be. Now they're the only thing on. Now we're getting chaotic. Orgy of the Damned is past. Wins all its awards. And Two Badass Businesses is still going on until the Dead Teddy Riders have a renaissance. And that's kind of where I'm at. And some of those details are in like books, like The Ballad of the Dead Teddy Riders is a really good book because it has my European stories, has my homeless stories, has my band stories, and then the rest is about weed, except the other 50 pages besides those. That's all in 50 pages, if you can believe it. But the other 50 pages of the Rolling Stone book are like an encyclopedia of rock and roll bands. And in my eyes, I'm telling it as a narrator, not that they know who I am, but that I'm familiar enough with them to talk to their managers and write about talking to their managers in Two Badass Businesses, which the whole music thing from that, like having songs like from Yellow Wolf and having songs like from Insane Clown Posse again or Metallica, that make it into Orgy of the Damned and are brought over from Two Badass Businesses, which is cool that we're. But that's why the eyes sometimes look at the screen. Like Rosh Mek's like, why are their eyes looking at the screen? Is it because I was like, well, because Vlad's perspective is the perspective that you get when he's not on frame and everybody else is. Because it's him running down to get the elixir, so why isn't every other POV shot that he's not in him? That was why I'd make noise as a cameraman. They're supposed to look up. Now, if I remember right when I was directing that, I told them I'd tap my hand against my ear or something for them to look up, so that they're actually commands to look up at me. And then later, Ross Shemeka was thinking, well, maybe it wasn't a command, or why did he do that? Because now they broke the fourth wall. Well, they broke the fourth wall by not match cutting it with me being back there looking at him. And then my head comes popping out of somewhere else in the frame later. Wouldn't have made much sense if I was even in that shot. So there's a lot of things to question when you're making a movie and making a set. We did ours like Fouillard or Corman, where you set the set and make it all how it is, and everything you film around there is what the movie's costing to make, but what it's making. So it's costing to make because of deterioration of the camera, which those cameras go on, man. Life's a dream, and when it's gone, the cameras go on, bro. And I'd love to stay here and chat with you, and we've had a good fireside chat, right, about getting out there and making movies and write your script. Yeah, if your script changes while you're making your movie and you want to go back and make it just like the original, go back and make it like the original. You want to get over ambitious and ask the Chamber of Congress where to take you on the most expensive places to shoot, so your budget's actually getting better on your end because you just filmed inside a church or something you got permission for. Now your budget's sky high, but you didn't have to pay for it because the church donated the shot. And that's one lucky thing we have in Colorado, is that we do have Chamber of Commerce and we do have Parks and Rec, but you have to have a little clout and prove that you can do it through the paperwork way a few times, and that I've done it the paperwork way about 6 times to the Parks and Rec was enough for them to say, go play your concert anywhere, record anywhere. But if you think record anywhere, then everything I record is the money made in the film because it's all retained in the film, but it's 10% devalued because it's still flat. Like, this isn't 3D, even though it looks like there's depth. So I could sit here and say, well, this is a depth shot and it's 3D and it's explaining everything, but I'm not going to suddenly switch shots and go to like some adventure story. And so I appreciate like Genji the Summoner helping me with advances, because it's not like money I can spend on anything but the Genji publication. And the Genji publication ties in with other movies I need to pay off. It's not that I need to pay it off, it's that the nonprofit studio can pay it off, and it would be dishonest for me to pocket it. Not just because I'm on disability for broken bones, which is kind of a sad but totally venerated side of the story, because we're still making these big, great projects, and that we're getting bands permission, and bands are coming to us because they're like, well, we don't want to lose this opportunity to meet the first director that didn't take money for his movies. And that YouTube's totally never been aware of that either, that all directors that go on there are trying to get those songs on their episode to sell the episode. Well, we're still selling the episode to YouTube. They're spending $10 at a link to watch it, but that's money that the band gets in its copyright from YouTube anyway, and so we're stepping aside and let that flow there. But now we're walking away with a movie we're credited with, and we have the rights to the song. Or at least for even a Cannes Film Festival screening, right? Which may have actually cost extra from the charge, and there's things like Genji the Summoner taking this advance and kind of dispersing it, and not really running out either. It doesn't really run out. It makes more, because then now we're at the stage where we've got everything all branded, and the branding is cost expensive. But then the branding makes the whole net worth better, and the net worth is what we're talking about. That this shot never changes. It's a fairly inexpensive shot. The room we're in is kind of expensive to rent, not really. But only for this much space. The rental of being in the movie is not what we're considering, with the room itself being in the movie worth 10% of what it's worth is still more expensive than I can pay out of pocket. You see, if I was renting this room for $70, or if I was at the club, the audio video club, and renting parts there, although they don't charge you if you're a member, but by the time setting it up and everything, the AV club would spend money on it. So every second that goes by, this is why time is money and nothing is free, because in cinema, every second that goes by is another chance of someone going further into this film, seeing more of it, and being totally taken in by everything that's in the frame, and how there is a capitalist factor. Everything had a cost. My glasses cost money. My hat cost money. Now, I can't make a movie without my hat and glasses. Now, I may have needed them on one movie when they broke, probably on that one. There's been a couple of times I can't find my glasses on movies, and it's cost me money to, like, buy another pair. And so, then that's part of the budget of the movie. But the real trick isn't losing it. It's having it all in there and already having it. And that's the whole reason studios' shelf life is good on their props, because if it's an assimilated prop, it's indestructible in Hollywood terms. They're always saying, oh, make a better prop. The best props in the world are in Hollywood. I guarantee it. Better than Bollywood props. Hollywood's got the props, the property masters, the props. And what a prop isn't necessarily like production design alone. It's like the things that are movable within the production design. As even though they're objectives, they're movable. Like a table wouldn't be a prop, because you're not just going to like pick up a table and throw it around. And if you did, it would crash and it's too massive. But a cup could be a prop if the guy picks it up, and like it has to be moved by a human. So he picks it up and moves it around like that. I'm not sure in film history when props came in. I had a prop drawer since I was a kid making movies, you know. But if there's a prop that you needed for a movie that you had to pay for, it actually appreciates in value for being in the scene and being seen for so long. So now I got a $4 like weird Twizzler toy. I don't have it now, but just imagine. And I'm playing with it, and it's $2 worth, but I play with it for like 3 minutes, and that's twice as long as a commercial. And now I'm going, and this is the only one that's in the commercial. See, you got to be cool with capitalism and brand it in the right way until it's irresistible to everyone to say, oh my gosh, now it's got a deleted scene of a deleted scene of a deleted scene. So it's like they cut the scene out of a scene that they deleted and then deleted the scene. I mean, it sounds like they could have just saved time on the sentence and said they deleted 3 scenes, or or I could have said, well, they deleted 3 scenes that were back to back, and either way it sounds confusing. Because 3 scenes back to back? So there's like a scene 1 and a scene 5 theoretically that connect right together. Well, that would work because it's the beginning and the end. Unless that came halfway through the movie, which that would work because that's the beginning of the half and the end of the half. And now that we've spoken of thine prophecy of why we teach MASTERCLASS for the next 12 years and maybe longer, and we don't want to get fired, and we don't want to screw anything up, and we want to keep working at Harvard, and we can't really take any more school with us, but USC approving me as a lecturer over COURSERA is just about the best thing that I could ever tell you happened, because my mentor, John Wagner, he was a professor at USC, still is. He's a professor at CALARTS. Greatest critic that ever lived. He's written for every magazine. He's gotten his credit. But that he's my mentor. But that he teaches at USC was one of his proudest things. And I think it's because everybody knows it's the best film school in the world. I went there as an undergraduate. It's the best film school in the world because not just because George Lucas paid like $1 billion, so it could be. And hey, in money terms, we just talked about that with movies. Do we take the billion and save to Hungary? Or do we take all the money of all the world and save to Hungary and then all go hungry and bankrupt? And we could have made money off the movie. So that we could have made money off the movie never dawned on anybody that was the whole idea of the investment. But even if we made $5, we could adopt 7 cents a day towards world hunger. But we had to invest the initial $10 million. And that I didn't invest it at all is because my producers at the time in Hollywood did all that. And the point I'm getting at in the story is we wouldn't have been able to do any of it from then on had it been a flop. Because had no one seen it and they'd have turned it off the internet, we owe everything to the internet, never turning it off. So if the internet starts to get iffy, then I start to get a little nervous as a professor because I teach these classes on the internet and you take them on the internet and then you can bear them through USC CalArts, where CalArts has made me a professor. And they're very proud that I'm doing 12 years of MASTERCLASS in this way. And I'll be reminding you each semester I'm doing 12 years. And I'm sorry in class in semester 1 I didn't take more time to tell you who I was. Aaron Sheley, Dr. Aaron Sheley. Finished my 12 by 12 for CalArts. That's like 12 movies, 12 cartoons, 12, more than 12 references. There are a lot of references. The reference sheet I'll have to go into at a later time in a grad school class because reference sheets happen to be the bane of my existence. And the only thing that I can think of when I think of reference sheet is when Denzel Washington in that Robert Zemeckis movie Flight flies that plane upside down and lands it. That's a letter of reference. You're so drunk that you fly the plane upside down, and when it looks like everything's gone crazy, you land it. And if you don't land it, you don't get through grad school because it's due today. The minute you start to write on it, you have 1 day to turn it in. You don't think that's a rule? No, I'm making it one. No, I can't make that rule of the Board of Academia. You should have an outline of it anyway at certain times throughout grad school, because you could be asked to turn in a fast-track hypothesis and scientific experiment that leads to an educated answer, the sort of the theory of the thing, and then you can turn in your master's project that way, and I could have done that, but I like to wait 20 years to see if any of your shiznit mattered and find out at the end it did. But that they thought it did before, and there were a lot of bids on my poetry book back in the day before it was even complete. Winning the Guinness Book of World Records was the reason I got PhDs in school, because I was able to turn in the poetry that was already critically deemed by John Wagner as an eccentric masterpiece. And it's this 7,000-page book of poetry that is the most poetry by a single author, and that's me. So now I've bragged all this Cannes Film Festival, Guinness, and the Pulitzer Prize. Like, who'd believe that? And that's a whole other story. The Webberverse gets Pulitzer Prize. The Webberverse got put out by USA Today. USA Today Online put their banner over it and put the book out. And it was there for like 6 years. But that the internet turnover thing is bothering me on YouTube MASTERCLASS. Not this level yet, but the turnover of things that disappear off the internet. As much as you just got to rely on the capacity of the article to live when you're writing one. Like, I don't think my National Geographic article is ever going to end because it's within. It ends, but it'll be published, has been published forever, and the internet will always have a way to link back to it, even if it's kind of difficult and doesn't show up on Google and gets cumbersome. You can still trudge through the internet and find the most recent convenient place to get it from. Now that I have a drop-down menu that's cybersecurity on Facebook, shows all my books. So if you want to read my books, drop down the pinned post, and you'll see all 54 of them. That Genji the Summoner's up there. And I'm working on a new one called The Boulder Estate, about how in CU Boulder there were 10 scientists hired to write novels over a course of a year. And they had a grad student that was going to grade them on the novel, and they were going to kind of have a competition that they shoved the competition aside and did all their novels. And there's one libertarian guy writing this Fountainhead Shrugged book, and it's really interesting. And then this freak of nature flood hits, and it's not like a karmic retribution flood. It isn't. Like, they haven't done anything wrong. It's Boulder. There's good karma there. They don't litter. They don't, pollute. They don't, use GMOs. They don't use anything toxic. There's no toxins in Boulder. That's why the Church of Scientology is in Boulder. And all this is in this book. And this rainstorm got trapped behind Copper Mountain and then blew through this crack and then fell into a pool, and then a flash flood started when the rest of the cloud came through the mountain. Clouds can actually go through mountains. No, I don't know. The cloud goes through the mountain, or the tree falls in the forest. It certainly looks like the cloud goes through the mountain, but it actually stops in a little mist on the ground. Or does it go through? I don't think so. Cumulonimbus, that means it's water vapor. But that it goes into the mountain as water vapor and can flood out in a displacement way, where it drains out in large amounts and then pops a cork in some of the other drains. And pretty soon Boulder, which is like a bowl, is filled with water. And in the real story, houses were underwater. But in my story, it's a little less severe flood than it really was. I don't know why I chose to do that. Just kind of take the conflict off of it, that they were actually having ambulances and hazmats. And in my book, it's like the bungling professor assistant's going back to his house, and seeing if he can find any notes of the leftover remnants of all the computers that just got destroyed. And then all the novels get deleted. I'll give you a little spoiler about my book, and it's not done yet. It's getting there. But the Boulder Estate has this interesting point that all the professors took it well, because while it gave them such a rush of adrenaline, not only was it the rush of the adrenaline, but writing a book like that, they'd never done a novel, almost ready to turn it in, and then having it lost to a rainstorm that's unprecedented in Boulder history, in a weird, almost Burning Man kind of way, is totally the most amazing adrenaline rush ever. That they come out into the storm and they're like joking around like, "Ye have taken my book, but ye have not taken me freedom," or whatever. These are like professor jokes, that they only do that to make fun of Braveheart, but that each professor, when they saw Braveheart the first time, they just thought that it had too many slow-mo shots in it. Especially where, like, they'll crack someone over the head with an axe and it's in slow-mo. It's like, why didn't horror films adapt to that? Now, I know that Passion of the Christ had a few axes to the head. Now, we're going through this Decalogue pack, and I'm going to go a little late, class, because we had to discuss my credentials, but we never discuss my credentials, and I get on the subject of it and then right back off. Doesn't mean we're done talking about myself, because this is the only venue I can really do that. I can't do that in the novel form, except in like an author's note, and has to relate to the book, and that I spelled it out in nonfiction where I'm coming from with logic and mathematical theory and quantum physics and CALARTS. You have to have it all. You have to pretty much have a Harvard degree. With CALARTS, you have to have every impossible thing achieved that you possibly can, as long as that's about 144 of one type of art as a possible thing, being that it's a great work of art. Then you can submit 12 other categories of the arts back to CalArts. And I'm giving too much away because you got to read the course catalog, and one of the rules is you can't get either the master's or the PhD without eventually taking GRE, which I did in Denver. And you also, to get the degree, have to take all the credits, have to take all the track through the program, which you can do on COURSERA. And this is getting you points, me telling you that. But until I had the remote access to CALARTS, I had to submit through a portfolio that I was still working on it. That they okayed the masters isn't even as cool as how they okayed the PhD when you get the 12 animated films. Because I was going to be like, I can't do painting, but I can do animated films. So we get the 12 by 12 by 144 in there. And it's looking good. It's looking good. I haven't had any complaints. Everyone's saying the CalArts PhD is mine. And so the question was, is Harvard easier to get a PhD at? Yes and no. In like their psychology department, in like their law department, in their accounting department, in their business school. And I'm forgetting political science, all of those at Harvard are really hard. And comparative religions isn't to be trifled with. It's the closest they have to a film school. And tell me here now, and I'm not saying I even get as mean as they do on comparative literature. I have written a book on comparative literature. You all should read it. It's about the 10 greatest books of all time, and they're all in the Great Books, the Western World series. But it's my picks as the best, and in what order I'm going to review them. And there's pop culture jokes in it, like there is in Genji the Summoner. And my pop culture jokes aren't really cultural pollution. They're always pop culture related to the theme of the movie that we're in, or the book that we're in. And so now I'm looking at the clock and I'm like, 49 minutes. So we got a 10-minute review of the Decalogue, and we're coming back to the Decalogue in another master class even soon. Soon we'll be back, because now we only got time to look at 1 through 3. So that the Decalogue, just to set this out, the word Decalogue means 10 books in a series. I've done a Decalogue of movies, the Orgy of the Damned Decalogue. that this is the original 10-movie Decalogue is weird because the movie's called Decalogue, but Decalogue 1 is called I Am the Lord Thy God, Thou shalt have no other gods before me. And this starts to give away the plot, but that before we go rummaging through this dark, like film noir, like digital camera, like almost like Dogma style film, but like Kieslowski really embeds his images in gold and hues of like lightning, and that Kieslowski gets these close-ups that get every nuance of the face and every characteristic of the face, and the camera clarity, and that it looks like candlelight when it's regular light because it's dark. Areas of the screen aren't made bright by a light that normally would, and that's a total technique of Kieslowski that he takes after the Andrei Rublev Tarkovsky is not even an understatement. And one day, maybe when the war ends, we'll talk more about Tarkovsky, or I'll call a masterclass and get special permission to teach about that. But for now, just remember, and we're not going to go really through the plots, because what I want to describe about the films is that each one is a commandment from God. So like in the adultery one, do not commit adultery. This guy thinks his wife's cheating on him, and she is. And he just thinks she's cheating on him, and he has a bike accident out of jealousy. And she gets back to him, and she's like, I'm sorry I was cheating on you, man, but he's like, well, I'm crippled now. So now we're looking at a really sad, almost, you can't say tragedy unless a god dies. And we're dealing with real humanist issues, which makes me think that it's less Swedish in a way now in the modern time of the international European film, because now we're seeing the pulling out the stops and making nothing metaphysical. That Kierkegaard is among the commandments and saying, basically, Kieslowski is going to use all the aesthetics of beauty to show a commandment broken, and that's how the Ten Commandments are anyway. It's a commandment broken, which means what the commandment says, and not to break it. A commandment broken shows what a broken commandment is, and so you know not to break it. And that was his idea. That's brilliant. And whether he's an atheist or agnostic or believer in God is of very little consequence to me. Like if it was Pasolini, I'd be like, was this his Catholic side or his communist side? Or if it's Scorsese, is this Catholic guilt? Or is this an arbitrary stained glass getting destroyed, And I'm not saying that their stained glass even gets destroyed in Martin Scorsese, but a little bit of windows get blown up in Gangs of New York, and like the Battleship Potemkin remake sequence at the end. And I love pastiche, and I love when directors make shots that already came before, like The Shining and Broken Blossoms, where they take the shot from the previous film and reset it up as a shot from their film. And Steven Spielberg once said that Close Encounters of the Third Kind, each shot in that movie is a shot he saw of a movie he was watching that night, that he jotted down how they were going to do that shot, watched another movie, jotted down how they were going to do that shot. And interestingly, that's one of the least schizophrenic of all of Steven Spielberg's movies. And I'm not saying schizophrenia is a mentally ill thing. I'm saying schizophrenia is you're stuck in the moment in an artwork. Like you're stuck at Celine and Judy's house eating magic candy, and now you're in the movie. But Kieslowski brings up philosophy of Kierkegaard and existentialism. Now we know it's loneliness, isolation, loss. We learned that in Bresson a few weeks ago. We know it's despair. We know it's isolation. Is existentialism. We know there's no afterlife. I mean, there can't be, because otherwise we'd have proven it by now that there was one. And that's my theory. I think we'd have proven that there was an afterlife by now if there was one. What, is the afterlife cut off from our life? Then how could it be the afterlife? Because if it's not cut off, I certainly haven't seen anything from the afterlife except in cinema. And if you want to tell me they use real zombies in movies, I say, yeah, but they use real zombies in movies. So that doesn't mean real zombies are out walking the street unless one broke off the set. And I think if one broke off the set, the Warner Brothers drone robots would disintegrate it and say it never happened. But what's interesting about Kieslowski is he's always using these weird lit shots. He's kind of like Bergman. His later 3-color trilogy does these long, kind of drawn out, based on the color of the film, kind of sequences that are widescreen, and they'll play this beautiful music. Some of it's made for the film. Like I remember 3 Colors Blue winning like an Oscar for Best Score. And it's the French score, and it's like the whole frame's blue, everything's got a blue tint, and they're playing some jazz song that goes with her riding in the car, and it's really infamous for that. The white film, mainly white filters in the snow, and they're the color of the French flags and that. We're going to talk more about Decalogue, and I'm really happy we got to have this discussion about who I am and who I'm getting to know. You don't got to remember me as though I'm someone famous. I'm not famous like most masterclassers. I'm an artist that is looking for a teaching job, and Harvard said, well, get us on COURSERA. We liked you in COURSERA, Harvard, back in the day. That if I could have picked it all over again, I wouldn't have changed it a bit. The USC has been kind to us. But we need to discuss more about the Decalogue, the parameters of the film, the outside of the mise-en-scène and what's off-screen space is championed in that film. The use of the everyday, the positive being domesticity or urban life or things you encounter in a marriage and that. I just want to say one in specific, the Thou Shalt Not Steal one is the episode 10. And in that one, there's these 2 brothers that really need money, and they're looking to find money, so they talk to their dad to see if he can give them any money, and he's like, well, if you sell this stamp, you can either buy another stamp with it, or go have your money for whatever you want to do. So they get the stamp. And then they find out the stamp he gave him was worth like $300. And then they find out that the whole series of that is like $300,000. So they're going after it. And now they go back to the dad, and the dad isn't really telling them where he showed them eventually at some point where he keeps the stamps. His stamp collection, that he had that whole series, and they wanted to go see. Well, the dad dies. And I don't remember where he died from, and he might have already been dead at some in-media rest point at this cut, but the dad dies. He passes on the stamp collection to the 2 sons, who had talked to him right as he was dying, and they wanted the collection. So they go in, they see if they can match the stamps. They match all these stamps, and they find out the whole collection's worth like $2 million, and they're so excited. But then this thing happens where, since they were getting the stamps from their dad, and it was almost unfair inheritance, because they were just going to sell it off. And the stamp insurance is already large and wide. Now get this. They sell all the stamps for a single stamp that would have collected with one of their dad's stamp collection books, the only one they kept. And for that would make that worth $5 million. But the only way they can afford the stamp, even after selling all the stamps, which all the stamps get stolen anyway, so they can't sell the stamps. So now the brother sells his own organs to buy the stamp, and they buy the stamp, but something goes wrong at the collectors, and he's like, well, now you have a series, but since everything got stolen, we'll have to take these stamps to cover the insurance of everything stolen. Now, if that isn't bad luck with a stamp collection ending in a horrible way and thinking that that's not the wrath of God, I lost all faith in everything when I saw that. I thought, now he's sitting there without his liver going to die in a few days. His dad's dead, no stamps. They were already having money problems to begin with, and now the other brother's got to go bankrupt and probably give his liver to the other brother. And that's why we're going to talk more about this amazing Decalogue, because that thou shalt not steal runs ethics and morals. That thou shalt not steal is saying we shouldn't just take what isn't ours, because now we got the stamp collection and it's not really ours, even though it was kind of willed to us or whatever through our intermediate lawyer or whatever. That they were never interested in the stamp collection until he was about to die. Thou shalt not steal. That's an ethic. See, that's not a moral, because if somebody gives you something and you take it and you want it, it's more of an ethic, because you got to know how to use it and what to do with it, ready for it to come to any use, or whether it falls into disrepair. So, if it falls into disrepair, then the game is off. But what's really thou shalt not steal is the backward to that, and that is everything gets stolen. And that's the breaking of the rule. And the Bible always does that too. This is based on, we're going to be a little shy from the Bible because there's so many different interpretations, and language to language, it's nothing alike. But if at the end of the stamp episode, they stole from them by paying the insurance back, not necessarily, but that everything gets stolen is almost a mortal coil saying you can't take nothing with you. And like the Reaper takes it. But you could also say that everything gets stolen is just the theme of the episode, because it's the opposite of what the commandment says, and thus is the commandment broken. And those throughout the Decalogue, we're not always sure who broke the commandment, but we can see the broken commandment so big that now we see why that commandment exists. And Kieslowski's using that in almost a playful way, although this is not much of a comedy, because he's saying none of this is based on the Bible. These are all ethics, old ethics that we break all the time, and none of these are saying resolve the ethic. But then I'm hanging my hat over the fact that I'm changing the aesthetic lighting at the exact scene that the commandment is thrashed in half by whatever force of the universe thrashed the commandment in half. And instead of replaying the character saying, oh, we should have done this, we should have done that, it just kind of floats off into melancholy demise of doom. Because now all the commandments are broken. Nobody really mitigated them getting broken. They just got broken. It was a common everyday thing that those things happen. But that those are severe broken. And commandments isn't what Kieslowski's preaching. He's that these are commandments that are broken. And that's the whole point of listing a commandment in the Bible, is because they're broken commandments. Underneath the commandment is the broken commandment. Do not break this commandment. Well, if you break the commandment, that's the only way you'd know if you broke it. But do not break the commandment is like saying the commandment's breakable, probably has been broken, would be broken. If it's breakable, try not to break it is not what it says, because it's a commandment. But that God's giving these commandments right as all of them are being broken in the Bible is such a ritual that goes back to like Kabbalah and Nag Hammadi and Eastern types of Judaism. And we've discussed it all for now. And I hope you got a little bit of a kick in the pants. And I do apologize for walking you through some of the things I've done in my life. And I'm proud of it. And you can look it all up on the internet. But I think it's pretty hard to say I could have gotten this masterclass without any of that. And that's like the CALARTS degree. Well, you couldn't have done it unless you'd been to Euro Disney, you know? There's all these stipulations. Well, I was homeless for 4 years. Interesting. Berkeley liked that. Okay, good. You know, There's like, oh, you got 5 degrees. What was your fifth one in? Religious studies? Well, we don't accept that here, but since they accept that there, you can apply for a gold key. So that's how I paid for a lot of it. Wasn't for the movie money, because designated movie money is like props that follow you around. Like if you're in a car, that's the prop of the film. That's a moving set. That's all like moving sets. It's a moving set. And so everything that's in the property of the shot is got, even in a movie like The Decalogue, which is pretty rarely inexpensive, that just probably only cost like $50,000 to make. It was cheap, but it was beautiful film. I mean, the shots of the snow in this film and some of the scenes are like Fargo shots. And we're seeing it around the time before Fargo. And I just can't understand that anyone would complain about the beautiful apocalypse of life being the induction of the broken command as a way to represent the command. It's like a picture that shows what will happen if the commandment breaks. But that Kieslowski lingers on that is totally intentional, self-reflexive, saying, I'm not preaching this, but this is a metaphysic of the film, that we metaphysically or metaphorically transform these aesthetic sequences to match with the result of the broken commandment. And that's how the conflict's resolved. We see the doom of the characters that are doomed from the broken commandment. And for now, that's where I'm going to leave you in the Decalogue. There's still more to be discussed. The adultery episode where the guy crashes his bike. I mean, it's a depressing film, but it's beautiful, good music. That it was imported in 1988, and I remember an article came out in Time magazine about it. And I read the article in Time magazine, and I thought, well, in 10 years I might be able to find it. 20 years later, I got the box set, and it's expensive, but it's a real good box set. It's from Facets Video. And really, if you're looking for a lot of rare titles, like some of the titles we've had in the movies, especially like silent films or whatever, Facets Video may be a place to check. And like I was saying, USC has been real generous in giving me a chair for D.W. Griffith. And one day on Masterclass, I'll have a 2-part series on Griffith, and we'll lay it all down. Because I only usually tend to leave little bits and pieces for you. And I think I've done the Griffith, Louis Armstrong, Making Jazz Singer one too many times. Although they were trying to make it, and the Al Jolson one would have been way better, but not because there was blackface in it again, and the Jewish stereotypes and all that made it look like early vaudeville, but that it was early vaudeville is what's weird about it. Like, they're all saying, that makes it look like early vaudeville. Well, that's where it's located, is in early vaudeville. It's probably like when Fouillade was accused of filming at the Grand Guignol, and he's like, I did film at the Grand Guignol. Which is the most terrifying thing I've ever heard. So if he was filming at the Grand Guignol, that means some of the people that die in the movie really die. Did your aunt's girlfriend really die in the vampire? That sounds like the Blair Witch Day vampires. Alright, well, good night, everybody. I'm a real professor. We've been real professors now for almost a year. Dad, it took me forever to get situated as a professor, but I did teach few classes at my local college, CMU. It's a great college, Colorado Mesa University. Mavericks football team. They're a very good school. They have mass communications. They have media classes. I don't mind if they showed these here, but that's not the point. The point is they have classes for like cinema studies, because we can take cinema studies and abstract media studies from that. They even had radio studies at CMU. And I don't even know what radio studies are. Somebody once said, why don't you do radio criticism? And I said, radio criticism always gets you lost in that Radioland murder mystery movie. Did you never want to do it again? You get 5 minutes into it, and it gets real grisly, and you're like, George Lucas did a Scarface? No, I'm kidding. It's not that bloody, except that scene where that guy gets hit with that camera and his head comes off. No, that was edited out. That was in Attack of the Clones. I love you all. I hope you have pleasant dreams tonight. If you need to get up and stretch before you go to bed, but it's getting late, and it was sad that we only got through 10 minutes of the Decalogue, but it was perfect because it led us to our excessiveness, which is gluttony, which is a deadly sin, because I'm a glutton for punishment, and getting punished is always reckless enough. But just because I'm getting punished doesn't mean I'll be dead. I'll get punished and I'll be okay. No, I'm kidding. We don't believe in guilt here, except the Catholic guilt of Martin Scorsese, and that I was only a Catholic for like 10 years, but still the Godfather, so still kind of Catholic. The only person allowed to make me feel guilty is Martin Scorsese, and that I joined Catholicism to understand the meaning of mean streets was just so I could put my hand on a candle, and it was also so I could say, you don't pay for your sins in the street. I mean, no, you don't pay for your sins in the church. You pay for your sins in the street. Everything else is just bullshit.